welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past programs are available in podcast form. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Hit us up at dj@ArtistFirst.com. Now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And we are Michael and Margaret Lyons, and welcome to the Soul of the Everyman. Mm-hmm. Where my voice will last about next 20 seconds, and then it's just going to be Margaret.
Thanks.
But, everyone knows she carries the show anyway, so.
No, dear. My goodness, no.
I'm just the comic relief.
No.
The over-medicated person in the corner?
No.
No? I think I'm all those things. Anyway, well, tonight, we are going to own it.
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed.
We are totally going to own it. Tonight we are going to talk about a word that everyone's familiar with, and that word is own. And I think it's an interesting word. I think in the latter half of the 20th and 21st century, the beginning of the 21st century now, Americans are very obsessed with owning things. And so I think we all have a very good sort of broad brush concept of the word own. We want, when you ask somebody what it is to own something, they really start talking about how much it costs, or what it takes to buy it or to purchase it. But there's a foundational concept here which I think gets glossed over a lot, especially in our sort of modern day consumer culture. And I said America, but really it's the whole world. The whole world is sort of obsessed with consumerism, and there's everyone kind of rails against it, but there's nothing really terribly bad about it. We're able to buy the goods and services that we need, and we're able to live probably, if you were to compare the average person's lifestyle today, and by that I mean the quote unquote common man, to the average person's lifestyle of 100 years ago, they would be easily comparable to the lords, ladies, kings, dukes, barons, princes of 100 years ago. We take for granted our opulence, especially in the West.
So you think that's 1920 we're looking at then. It's 100 years ago.
You're right. It's a little, but even in 1920. But let's go back to 1820. Let's go back 200.
Yeah, a couple hundred years ago.
Yeah, I mean and certainly if you go back to recent history in the last few hundred years, our standard of living, the fact that we can pretty much order up whatever we want to eat, whenever we want to eat it, in almost whatever not today these days, but almost whatever circumstances you want to eat it in, that we can fly on planes, all the things that we have in this society, and sort of the basis of that of being sort of this consumer driven, this sort of goods and services driven existence we lead. And so all of us think about owning those things or acquiring those things and how you do that. But the foundational concept here of ownership is what we want to talk about, because it gets lost. I think people think if you have enough money, you can own whatever you want. And that's true, but the foundation of ownership is the ownership of you. And by that I mean that the only thing that you are born owning before you have a single red cent to your name is yourself, whether you know it or not at that moment. At the moment of your birth, you probably have the concept that you as a unique individual own yourself. But very soon, very rapidly, even without ever telling it to people instinctively feel that their life is their own. And that's that word there. And people will say that, my life is my own, and then they'll usually follow it with, and I can do whatever I want, or I can lead my life as I wish. And those two things are terribly intertwined. The fact that your life is your own, and the concept of being able to do is the concept of free will, that I can through my own volition, do or make a choice to do this or that. And I'll just throw out the third concept. And the other thing which makes life and ownership and free will important is that there's no backseats.
There's no what?
There's no backseats. It's not a video game. You don't get any do-overs. The moment is fleeting. It is now. You make a decision and you have to own the consequences. You get or lose based on what you decide to do with your, and this is the other thing that makes it precious, your limited time. This is the foundation of ownership, is that you own you own your will, and your time is limited. So your choices matter.
I think we have to touch on the concept of owning and understanding that this is a very basic thing that you begin to learn when you're young, because you always want to know, well, what's me and what's you? It's an awareness of, wait, there is a distinction between me and you. So belonging, that concept, is linked in with owning. So something belongs to me and something belongs to you. I mean, let's face it, how many times have we seen a little one playing with something and another one comes by and grabs it and all you hear is, mine!
Almost immediately. They learn that word quick.
But, I mean, it's not even necessarily something that you have to teach to them. It's just like, it's mine, and he took it from me. How dare he? You know.
Yes. But go ahead. You finish your point. But that's seminal.
It is very basic, and it's the beginning of understanding what the belonging part actually means. Because when you own something, we always think of something that you're owning. But it's more than that, because you begin to look at it in terms of how, as you said, you're supposed to take ownership of your actions, and whatever consequences may come, they're yours and no one else's. That is the developmental goal that we're taking steps toward, knowing exactly what is yours and in your life and what is not.
This is a beautiful seminal concept, because let's broaden it a bit. You know, we talked about the ownership of self, and what you just mentioned is knowing the difference between self and not self. And then there's, you mentioned it already, the idea of extending self into objects. And then there's also the concept of belonging. The immediate unit of belonging is you. You belong to you. The next most immediate unit of belonging is the family. Mm-hmm. There is a bond, which I'll hesitate to say. I will not say that it's ownership, but the word ownership here is fraught with all kinds of other connotations. We don't like to say that people own people. In fact, nobody owns anyone. Even someone as close to you as your own mother, doesn't own you. And it's a very important distinction that even your root foundation, the person who gave birth to you, doesn't own you. Even God doesn't own you. You are uniquely owned by one thing, yourself, but it's all the consequences thereof. But
Right. But that is exactly it. There is a fuzziness between owning and belonging. And most people want, the reason why owning has that negative connotation, if you're talking about being owned by a family, is that you become an object then. And that the human soul and spirit rises up against that. It's like, no, 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 I am not a thing to be owned.
Exactly.
Okay. But I do belong. And that distinction between owning and belonging should be clearly understood and delineated. Otherwise, there's plenty of room in there for manipulation by other people on you.
And to digress for a moment, ownership implies control.
Mm-hmm.
And
or the right to control.
Yes, and toxic relationships often are foundationally improperly based on a sense of ownership of the other.
Mm-hmm.
But before we go too far down, because there's one thing we found, just to parenthetically, you were about to say it too, there's a lot here. Ownership goes on and on and on. We're horribly concerned with it as a people, as a human people. However, the foundational concept is wonderful, and then the idea of there's another way of saying in the English language, when you're related to people, especially in English, you say I'll own them. I'll own them. I'll own them in the sense that their actions as a representative of our unit, and this is where we extend the concept of unity to a family and make it into an organism. And the interesting thing about organisms is they're supposed to be treated as one thing. You've heard this same concept in the, if somebody offends anyone in my family, they offend me. The transmission of offense or the defense of anyone in your group. But this concept is rife for abuse, and but it's foundational in some level of saying that in essence you are not an individual, you are owned by a family, and there's toxicities here, many, especially when it grows larger and larger into societies and greater things. Cultures. So there is peril in abdicating any part of your individual ownership of you to a larger or an external thing which is not you. There's peril there, because to the extent that you relinquish the ownership of you, or you delegate the ownership of you to another, you give up a portion of your individuality and your free will. This is a gray area. Because in any functioning society, we have to acknowledge that others have free will and we have free will, and that our will and their will may conflict. And then there has to be a way of arbitrating these conflicts, and there are good ways and bad ways. And all functioning societies find ways to arbitrate these types of contentions. But the basic level of ownership really can't be abdicated. You really do own you. To the extent that you're willing to fool yourself into abdication of the ownership of you to another is the extent to which you are willing to relinquish your individual freedom and free will. It can also be the other way, Margaret. You mentioned that you can be subjugated, and that human spirit rails against this. If someone says, "I own you," there's an instant in all people in every culture. There's an instantaneous response, no. Whether you're able to effect anything whether you're able to do anything about it is another thing. But the human spirit and spark, the soul, rebels against the concept of ownership.
Well, this is the main reason why we rail against bullies. Whenever someone comes up to you and says, well, you're going to do this because I'm going to force you.
Yes.
Like, no, I own me. You can't force me to do anything under duress, under pain. It's like, no, I do not give that in. So when you are faced with things like that, it's understanding that what this person is actually doing is trying to take away the ownership or a piece of yourself. You take it from you, which is, energetically speaking, I think we've said this before, it's a power struggle. And whoever winds up being on top takes energy from the one that they're trying to subjugate. You actually feel depleted when you're in a situation like that and someone has dominated you in some way. You know, we don't like it, and we're not exactly sure why we don't like it, but energetically speaking, it feels like some vampirish person has come by and sucked energy right out of you. And it's like, well, that's mine, thank you. You can't have it.
Well, again, that concept of mine. To extract that a little bit, the idea that one can be subjugated to another's will, and that it depletes you, that it takes energy away from you, is at the level of if your will is no longer your own, again, this word is no longer your own, you lose your individuality. You become a subject. You become an object of the other person.
You become an object. If
Right.
you give your will over to someone or something, you can be looked on as an object by the person that you're giving it to.
Right.
In other words, subhuman.
Yes. And the other interesting thing here about being an object is that you have to give. We just said it. You give your will, or you give your ownership of you away. The interesting thing about that is that you have to agree.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned it before. If you say, no matter how much is done to me, I refuse to submit. You can kill me, but I won't give up my will. I won't give up the ownership of me. This has been the foundation of Solzhenitsyn, of resistance, of freedom within the mind. You can take everything away from me, but you can't take away the freedom of my mind,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore my will and the ownership of me. It is a choice to give up. It's interesting that you have to use your free will to give up your free will. And you always have the choice to reassert your ownership, because it's never true ownership. Every enslaved people from the beginning of time has thrown off their chains, not necessarily by force, so that was probably the actual end of it. It was by force, but by realizing that they were not justly owned, that there was no thing that owned them, and therefore they were free, and they just had to make it happen. That without your agreement, you cannot be made an object. So therefore, you're willing your own objectification. You have to agree to it.
Right. You have to engage in it. You have to what is the word I'm looking for? When something rises up and you see it, it doesn't become something that you're actually interacting with until you embrace it or engage with it.
Mm.
And that is something that you can choose to engage in or not.
Mm.
So when someone is trying to subject you to, you're going to do this, you're going to give your free will over to me, you can say, well, you can agree to it, but the truth of the matter is it's still yours.
That's exactly the point I was going to say, that there is no way to actually separate you from the ownership of you. It is always a chimera. It is always a fooling of self to say that someone else has you in their control. Now, can someone force you? Yes, they can threaten your life. They can force you to do things. But I read this once long, long ago. They said if everyone resisted control, such that, yes, I am your, I don't give you my object, but you can force me to do everything you want. It takes a whole person's will to force another person's will, step by step. You defeat the concept of ownership and objectification by saying, yeah, but you have to do everything, which means, in essence, you're my slave. You have to tell me to do everything. One of the classic ways that people resist is passively by saying, okay, tell me what to do. Every blessed thing. Pick up my finger, put my finger down. There's no, I will do nothing without instruction. And therefore, yes, I'm your complete object, but you have to you have to tell my heart to beat. And that becomes so onerous for those who pretend that they control you that they give it up.
Well, it's interesting because it reveals the underlying intent or motivation of forcing someone to do what you want them to do. Because if you actually had it, you can't even do it for yourself. How are you going to do it for somebody else?
Right. What they try to do is frighten you
into using your own power against you.
Against you. And this is the lie of subjugation, is that you really can never be. What they do is frighten you into making choices that are not your best will for you, but that you choose to do things for the other, that they can't do for themselves, as you just very presciently said. If they could do it for themselves, they would do it. They don't know how to do it for themselves, but they figured out maybe I can force somebody else to do it for me, frighten them into doing it.
So what you're actually doing is giving over to a concept.
Yes.
That somehow someone is going to influence you because of the power that you're giving them. And you look at that and you turn around and you go, okay, there's a mind blower.
It is, and is when you come down to the concept of ownership, that you own you, and it is indivisible from you that you own you, that no one else can own you no matter how hard they try, that the only thing they can do is frighten you or threaten you, which is the same thing, into making choices that don't benefit you, that benefit the other through force. But you're still owning you. Even the defense of I was only following orders doesn't work at a certain level, because at the certain level we say, but you pulled the trigger. You had a choice. Or whatever it was, you have your ownership of you is not divorceable from you, even under great duress at a certain point. So, although you can be forced to do things, and there is a defense there certainly is a defense there, because you say, well, I would have lost my life if I didn't do X, Y, or Z. People are still held to account under circumstances where the basic levels of humanity are being violated, and you had a choice to either resist or do, and you did. What I'm trying to say is, no matter what, even under very powerful compulsion, because we recognize that you really can't do this without volition, that you have to do it with your own choice, regardless of compulsion, we still hold people to account. We make them own their actions. That's really the foundation of the law, is that what you do, you are held to account for. You have to own your actions.
And your words.
And your words. You mentioned that too when you're children. One of the first things we teach children is to own your words. And by that I mean is that you tell a truth or you tell a lie, and you have to teach them the difference, and that you have to own your truths and eschew your lies, because ownership is, your word is a precious part of you.
You have to be taught that your word, what you say, is very important, and it is part of your character. So if you're saying something and, they'll very blithely lie to you. It's like, did you steal that cookie?
No.
Yeah.
It was Johnny.
No, there's crumbs coming off your face. It's just...
And it's cute, but you have to stop it right there.
And yeah, thank goodness it is amusing and cute, because you're just like, okay, look, you can't just lie. Just not. I may not be happy with it, but you can't lie.
Right. Because it's a very interesting concept. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit. But the idea of owning your words is because the word is the expression of the will. And when you make a statement, you are held to account for that statement. You say, I did or I didn't, and if it reflects reality, it's fine. Even if it reflects what you know, whether it's the truth, but it's what you know. You have a limited ability to know things. You can't know all. So you say, well, what I saw was this. And as long as that's what you saw, you are held to account, and the accounting is true, and your word remains true. But you have to, as an adult and as a child growing to an adult, you have to own your words, because your words, as an expression of your will and of your choices, what I say is to be communicated to the other as a truth. You become responsible. Ownership very quickly turns into responsibility. If you own your words and your actions, you're responsible. What's responsibility? For the consequences, for the subsequent actions that someone else took or that happened because of your words or your deeds. So you and your words is an expression of ownership. I'm me, I own me. I own my words. I own my actions. I am responsible.
Yeah, that's a process.
That's a horrible thing. No one wants to be responsible.
Nobody really wants to fess up.
And let's take a responsible studio break and go back, and we'll confess all of our sins, and we'll meet everyone on the other side of the break with a little more ownership.
wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief, Dev, is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers. The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the 4th Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is Book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man, and welcome to the second half of The Soul of the Everyman, and where we own you.
Oh, my.
We don't want to own you, people. But we are talking tonight about the word own and the concept of ownership. And we were just discussing, and you were going to mention about, with children and the fact that when we have to own our words, we learn very early.
Right. When you have to consciously teach that because...
you said they had to experience it.
Yes. Because it's so easy for them to just say anything just to get out of trouble. And they have to understand that what they're saying actually matters. So when they go through this experience, letting them feel what it's like. So when they do lie, and when they finally get to the point of, yes, I lied.
You take ownership.
Mm-hmm. And what that feels like, that because there's a sadness and a disappointment that you internally feel. When you look at that, you're like, oh, I've disappointed them. And there's a part of their little heart that just doesn't want it. I don't want to do that. They want to run away instead of owning the fact that, oh, I've disappointed mom or dad again. So experiencing that, admitting it and letting them see that the repercussions really aren't, taking the repercussions for what they said. And then how do you feel when you're actually speaking your truth?
Correct. And I think this is an important lesson that you learn. And as you become a responsible adult, you own your. One of the things that everyone wants when they're growing up is they want to be on their own. Again, this word, the on your own. And this usually means that you're independent and you're responsible. These are both consequences of owning yourself, of once you say that I'm going to take responsibility for my actions, I will make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and we all would like to just get out of the consequences with a lie. But we realize, after being taught and being understand, that owning your words and owning your truth, is more important in the long run than the quick and easy lie.
I want to go back to what I said originally, that there is a confusion between belonging and owning. And usually that lie comes up because you belong to a family and you don't want to hurt that. You don't want to disappoint. And so that comes up easily. Instead of realizing that belonging to the family in its wholeness means something greater than just the expedient moment.
I certainly that's one reason, but people, there's a dynamic which people experience where they would like to only own positive results. We all would like to only own positive results of our actions or our words. However, life being what it is, and people being who they are, there is a good chance that any action or word you may express or take, a decision that you take, may have negative consequences. You may know that beforehand, in which case we call that premeditated murder. Or you may have some idea. We usually give people more grief if they knew that something was wrong and they did it anyway, right? So you may understand that the action you're going to take is inherently not correct, and you may then be called on it, and you have to own the consequences, or the law will make you own the consequences. But then there's just in general, we learn that we have to own the consequences of our actions, whether we intended them or not. A whole portion of society, a very large portion of society, is about saying you're sorry when something happens that you did from what you did, yet you didn't intend it, and you have to own it by saying, I own my actions, and I didn't intend that, and then I would like to make it up to you. This sort of cascade of action, decision, consequence, and then restoration or reparations of somehow making up to the person that you may have hurt, all comes from ownership, because the foundation of it is I own all my actions, and the consequences thereof, intended or not. You can accidentally injure somebody. You can accidentally, in the worst case, accidentally take someone's life or take someone's property or do something bad. And you have to own the consequences of your actions, because the foundational thing is you. I don't want to take a whole hour with this. I think we have to talk a little bit about ownership of things and why it matters. There's a great deal of controversy about something called property. One of the foundational concepts that people bring up all the time is that nothing is owned by anybody. The whole earth is free. And that may be true. Let's say a priori, the earth is free. Everyone owns every piece of the earth. And we put all these people, just two, on the earth, the whole earth and two people. And then we say to these people, go, be free, do whatever you want. They off, go, be free, and do whatever they want. As these people do things, they change the environment through their actions and their will for their limited time on earth. Because let's say they only have, a year to live. So we put two people on this completely free earth and give them a year to live. That means every day is precious, and anything you do or make is somehow infused with the preciousness of your time. So if you spend 1 hour of your precious day making a mug to hold coffee, it's your mug. You own it. Why? Because you took an hour of the year you have to live on Earth and some mud and fire and whatever else you had to do, mud and fire and whatever else you had to do, and you made a pot or a mug to hold something. It's your mug. It even has your name on it. The concept of owning that object comes in because you invested three things. You invested your time, you invested your will, and you invested your energy into this object, your mental concept. Any one of those three things, or all three together, have a consequence of what we call ownership. Then people say, well, but people don't do that. They just buy stuff. Well, yeah. Except buying stuff comes from a different kind of ownership. You acquire value of any type. It's a thing. You do it by the same way you got the mud into the fire, into the cup. You have to put something of yourself into it in your limited time. You do that, and you have a thing that you own. If somebody then says, I have a thing that I own, I'll trade you my thing for your thing, suddenly you have a $17 billion economy. Well, a couple things happen, and then you have a $17 billion economy. But the whole idea of, you just buy stuff with money, it begs the question of where does the value of money come from? And the value of money comes from the same place where you got the value in the muddy cup, or in the fired cup that you made from mud. And we even say this, we make money. And we make money by putting our will and our time and our energy into something. So it all comes, when you say I own myself, and I have a limited period of time, and I have the ability to make choices, and I have to be responsible for those choices. This is also the upside of those choices. If my choices were to make these boss cups that everybody wants, and I have one, and I have 5,000 other ones that I give to all my friends, or actually, I exchange them for other things, I'm the best potter in the world of the two of us around the world, and I'm going to die someday, but yet there'll be my pots right there that I have invested my time and energy and will into. Therefore, I own them. I'm responsible for them. They didn't exist before me. They'll exist after me. If someone takes one or breaks one, they're destroying something which was owned by me. The concept of property comes from the concept of self, and the concept of owning yourself is primordial. You own you. So therefore, you own your cup that you made, or the money that you made. That's where it comes from. So when we talk about ownership and responsibility and owning your words and your actions, that's where property comes from. It comes from because you're you, and you're making choices, and you're going to die someday. So whatever you do in your limited time on Earth that acquires changes or value because of you is yours. And whatever you do in your limited time on Earth that hurts other people is yours too. You own the bad things you do, and you own the good things you do. Nobody wants the bad things you do. People may want the good things you do, in which case we have a $17 trillion economy. So that's the shorthand cut version of ownership, where it comes from.
In order to do the interaction on a physical level.
Yes.
Yes. You have to form a relationship one to another. And the idea of commerce or trade comes about when one group has something and another group would like it, but also has something that could be traded for. That is the basic beginnings of commerce. If even they could even be in the same country or nation, and you have your farmers and you have your fishermen. So it is a natural thing. And it's interesting. I think some of the turmoil that is happening is understanding that the earth itself is what is helping produce this. It's respect. You have to be able to respect another person's choices and themselves, which means that you also respect things connected to them. And they, in turn, must respect you in the same sense. You must give space to each other for what you do, how you do it, and your interactions. I think the problem comes in when the respect is not taken into account. One group believing that it knows better than the other in this particular sector or that. It's like, no, each group has, or each person.
It's personal.
Each person, because that, you see how easily it went from a person to, well, the group does this. It's like, no. It comes down to the person and how you've decided to interact with those around you, whether they be in your group or not. So taking responsibility in that particular fashion, you understand that you've got to give respect for each individual, just as they must give space and respect to you. And that really is the foundation of what the United States itself was about. This is a concept that really was not part of the old cultures.
It's true. But if you take it all the way down, I like the personal, right down to the person. It's your unique spark and the ownership of you. Why is my ownership important to you and to the other? Because I recognize in the other that they are as valuable and unique a spark with its just as much right to exist. We say murder is the greatest crime because you are taking someone's life, which they own entirely, and you own absolutely not one bit, because you can't own another, away from them. You are taking from them. We say eye for an eye. You kill someone, you should be killed. I mean, there's all kinds of nuance, but the point is that you feel that your life is forfeit if you take the life of another. Why? Because they're parity, they're equal. Each life is as precious as any other life. Each will is as potent as any other will. So as on the personal, it's even better. When we extend it to societies, it gets fuzzy and people start to make arguments and all these other things. But at the person-to-person level, I wanted to get one more thing in before we run out of time, because this topic is huge. We may have to do 17 shows on this. But there's also this concept of ownership of a relationship that goes to the level of ownership. And in the sense of, see, people say, oh, you're owning somebody. No. You feel a bond with your other, the one with whom you have a relationship, such that it's exclusive. And why? Because you've chosen each other. Therefore, you've invested your will. You've invested your energy in each other. You've made each other different. Your actions and your words, your responsibility for the other, it all comes into the bond. The bond of energy, the bond of will, the bond of time, and it transcends a physical time and a physical space on Earth. We bind each other to each other, and we do it. You know, the bonds of marriage and the vows of marriage are vows of pledging what? My most valuable thing, me, I give to you in exchange for your most valuable thing. You, I give you, me, in exchange for you giving you. I've lost all the pronouns. We're giving each other, we're giving to each other that which is most precious, ourselves. And that's why these bonds are at the level of existential. They become life bonds. They become, I would give my life for you, you would give your life for me. And that's the basis of the familial bond as well. And where we get this idea of families owning, it can become toxic. But there is this idea of, I'll own you because you're one of us.
It's more belonging. This is what I'm saying. You belong to each other.
Yes.
But it has nothing to do with you being an object to be owned.
Right. But see, these where these words get confused, because belongings are objects. But when you say I belong to you, I don't mean that I'm your most favorite suitcase. I could be, but it's more than that. We unfortunately lack the precision in our terms, because we use the word own for the most venal of things and belonging for the most venal of things, and yet we also use these words for the most precious of things. I own my actions, my life, my will, and I have a bond with the other that is life to life and bond, person to person, spirit to spirit, soul to soul, and so our language falls apart, or rather it fails to capture these concepts adequately, and that's why people kind of use them to say, well, you can't own me. Well, that's obvious, but I know what you're trying to say, but yet at a certain level, those life bonds become so incredibly strong that my life is less important to me than your life is to me. And similarly, you feel that if this is a reciprocal bond, that should be the same on both sides. And so you go from a unitary I own me to a infinite we own each other in the sense of that bond.
Mm-hmm.
And this is important. This is as important as your next breath. Yet still, no matter what, no matter how much you bond at the life level with the other, you still, the reason you can do it is because you own you, and that you're willing to give you to the other at all times, at any time, for the duration of your life. And this the bonds of marriage till death do us part. And sometimes that doesn't happen. It goes on past death, and it keeps on going.
True enough.
But this is the only reason you can take vows in marriage or any contract, but take vows is because you own you, and you're willing to give you. You can't give what you don't own. This is one of those great phrases. You can't give what you don't own. You can give you because you own you. People can't ever take you because you own you, and you can't be separated from you. Therefore, no one can actually dominate or enslave you unless you allow them. And we know these things. We know them to be truths at the basic level. We own ourselves. We can give ourselves. We can never have ourselves taken from ourselves till death do us part. The soul is incarnate, and it is owned by you.
Right. And there's a whole, this could go on.
We could go on.
This can go on, truthfully. I mean,
we could own this conversation.
No, there's so many ideas and concepts that come in.
Yes.
You know, just not even touching on the evolvement of this from a societal point of view. I mean, women owning themselves is a recent thing.
Yes. And in some places on Earth, not. And
you are to be given in marriage, or you are enslaved, or, it can go on. So this concept of owning, as I said, we could probably do another show on this.
Well, let's own this show and say, thank you for allowing us to own your ears for this hour. And I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.